The town of Red Rock had always been a quiet place, nestled between jagged cliffs and endless plains. But today, smoke curled into the sky, and the distant thunder of hooves warned of danger. Raiders had been terrorizing settlements across the territory, leaving fear and destruction in their wake. In the town square, townspeople scrambled to prepare defenses, but panic clouded their coordination. Amid the chaos, a lone figure appeared on the horizon, moving like a shadow across the plains. His long hair braided neatly, his eyes sharp and alert, he rode with the confidence of someone who knew the land as well as his own heart. Wordlessly, he approached the gates, and when the first band of raiders appeared over the hill, the townsfolk froze. The warrior struck swiftly. He moved like a ghost, disarming attackers with precision, his movements fluid and almost impossible to follow. The townspeople could only watch, half in awe, half in fear. In minutes, the raiders were scattered, their leader fleeing into the distance. Silence fell, broken only by the ragged breaths of those who had witnessed the attack. Among them was a woman who commanded as much attention as the warrior himself. Her fiery red hair whipped around her face as she wiped sweat from her brow. Known as Maggie Callahan, she ran the town's general store and had long since earned a reputation for stubbornness and courage. She had faced bandits before, led supply runs into dangerous territory, and argued fiercely with anyone who underestimated her, but the sight of this lone Apache warrior left her with a strange mix of irritation and awe. "You?" she barked, striding forward, her eyes narrowing. "Who are you, and why are you here? Do you have any idea what you've just walked into?" The warrior's dark eyes met hers, calm but unreadable. "I go where I am needed," he said simply, his voice steady, carrying the weight of someone who had spent his life surviving the harshest of lands. Maggie's pride flared. She wasn't used to being questioned, let alone challenged. And yet, something in him made her pulse quicken, a sense of power and protection she couldn't quite name. "Well," she said, folding her arms, "Red Rock is not a place for wandering heroes. We manage on our own." He inclined his head slightly, almost as if acknowledging her words, yet there was no disrespect. "I saw you needed help." Her hands twitched toward the whip at her side, partly out of habit, partly out of stubborn defiance. She wasn't going to let anyone intimidate her, not even a man who could single-handedly save her town. Yet as she watched him assist the frightened townsfolk, hatching fences and fortifying doors, a reluctant admiration began to grow. His presence was commanding, yes, but it was also careful, respectful. He didn't take over. He guided. That evening, as the sun dipped below the cliffs, painting the sky with streaks of orange and crimson, Maggie found herself walking alongside the warrior. The air was tense, charged with the unspoken acknowledgement that their meeting was no ordinary encounter. He spoke little, letting his actions speak louder than words, and she found herself listening to every syllable, every gesture. "You've done a lot for this town today," she said finally, her voice softer than she intended. "And you," he replied evenly, meeting her gaze, "have fought harder than most." For a brief moment, the world outside seemed to vanish, the dust, the fear, the uncertainty. Here, in this quiet moment after chaos, two stubborn souls recognized a spark that could grow into something neither expected. Maggie's greatest battle had never been against raiders or the wild frontier. It was the battle quietly stirring in her chest, where courage met vulnerability, and pride collided with something far more dangerous, the pull of a warrior's heart. And she was about to learn that some battles could not be fought with weapons alone. The next morning, Red Rock stirred with cautious energy. The townspeople were grateful, yet wary, of the Apache warrior who had saved them. Maggie stood at the edge of the town square, arms crossed, watching him move with quiet efficiency, repairing a damaged wagon, helping an elderly man lift heavy crates. His presence was unnerving, yet impossible to ignore. "You don't have to do everything yourself," Maggie called out, her voice carrying more curiosity than reproach this time. He paused, glancing at her with dark, unreadable eyes. "I do what is needed," Maggie frowned. "And what about what I need?" she asked, half joking, half serious. "You may have saved the town, but you haven't saved me from your arrogance yet." He allowed a faint smirk, almost imperceptible, and returned to his work. That smirk ignited something in Maggie, a mixture of irritation and intrigue. She hated feeling unsettled, yet here she was, drawn to the man who moved like the wind across the plains. By midday, scouts returned with news. Another band of raiders was approaching, larger and more organized than the first. Panic rippled through Red Rock. Maggie's heart sank, but she forced herself to stand tall. This town had faced threats before, and they would face this one too. But now, with the Apache warrior by her side, she felt a strange mixture of fear and hope. "We need a plan," Maggie said firmly, stepping toward him. "I want you to help organize the townsfolk. They're scared, but if we work together, we can hold them off." He nodded, his expression unreadable, then began instructing townspeople, positioning them at strategic points and assigning tasks based on their abilities. Maggie watched, silently impressed. He wasn't just strong. He understood people, their fears, and their strengths. Hours passed in tense preparation. Maggie found herself running alongside him, helping where she could. Every glance, every brief touch as they passed tools or moved barricades sent sparks through her chest she refused to acknowledge. She told herself it was fear, adrenaline, anything but attraction. As the raiders appeared on the horizon, their war cries cutting through the air, Maggie felt a surge of determination. The Apache warrior turned to her, eyes meeting hers. No words were needed. A shared understanding passed between them. They would fight side by side and protect the town at all costs. The battle erupted suddenly. Raiders charged, arrows flying, and Maggie found herself ducking, rolling, fighting for every inch of the town. The warrior moved like a shadow, precise and deadly, saving townsfolk with minimal effort, yet always appearing just where he was needed most. Maggie realized she had never seen anyone so fluid in combat, so utterly fearless. During a brief lull, she found herself kneeling beside him behind a broken fence, their breathing heavy, hearts pounding. I didn't expect this," she admitted, voice shaky. "I didn't expect to need you." He met her gaze steadily, almost tenderly, though his expression betrayed nothing. "Neither did I," he said softly. In that moment, Maggie realized the battle she feared most wasn't the one raging outside the town. It was the one inside her own heart. This warrior, with his quiet strength and unwavering courage, had begun to break down the walls she had built over years of self-reliance and stubbornness. The fight continued until nightfall, with the raiders finally retreating under the cover of darkness. Red Rock had survived, but Maggie knew this was only the beginning. She and the warrior had faced the town's enemies together, but the true challenge lay ahead, learning to trust each other, to let down their defenses, and to fight for something more than survival. As the dust settled and the townspeople celebrated, Maggie found herself standing beside him, realizing that the fiercest battle of all had only just begun, and it wasn't with raiders, but with the rising, undeniable pull of her own heart. The sun rose over Red Rock the next morning, painting the cliffs with gold and shadow. The town, though battered, was alive with movement. Children helping carry water, blacksmiths repairing weapons, and Maggie walking among them, checking on every detail. Yet her thoughts kept returning to the Apache warrior, who had taken it upon himself to train some of the townsfolk in defensive tactics. He moved with quiet authority, correcting a man's aim here, adjusting a barricade there. Maggie watched him from across the square, the rising tension in her chest a mix of admiration and frustration. She hated feeling so drawn to someone she barely knew, yet she could not deny the pull. Every glance he gave her, every subtle nod of acknowledgement, set her pulse racing. "You're staring," he said suddenly, appearing beside her. His tone was calm, measured, but there was a sharpness that made her jump. Maggie stumbled, trying to regain composure. "I'm making sure everyone's awake and ready." "I wouldn't want anyone," she trailed off, realizing how foolish she sounded. He raised a brow, lips twitching ever so slightly in amusement. "You don't need to protect them all alone," Maggie's pride flared. "And you don't need to be bossing everyone around," she shot back, trying to mask the flutter in her chest. A brief silence followed, and for a moment the world seemed to shrink to just the two of them, standing amidst the bustle of a recovering town. It was a quiet understanding, a momentary truce between two fiercely independent souls. Then came the scout's warning. Smoke rose from the far ridge. A much larger force of raiders, perhaps twice the number of the previous attack, was approaching. Panic threatened to grip Red Rock again. Maggie's stomach twisted, but she squared her shoulders. She had faced danger before, and this time she would not face it alone. The warrior approached, his expression grave. "We must prepare immediately. They will not give mercy." Maggie's eyes met his, and she noticed the same determination mirrored in his gaze. "Then we fight together," she said. Side by side, they moved through the town like a single unit. Maggie issued orders to the townsfolk, while he positioned them strategically, trained them in new defenses, and reinforced their courage. In moments of quiet between instructions, their hands brushed, and Maggie felt a spark she could no longer ignore. She wanted to retreat, to deny it, but the heat of the moment, the closeness, was irresistible. The raiders arrived by mid-afternoon, their war cries echoing across the cliffs. The battle was brutal and chaotic, but this time, Maggie and the warrior moved in perfect synchrony. He covered her flanks, she directed townsfolk to hold lines, and together they became a force neither the raiders nor Fierc could break down. At one point, a raider lunged at Maggie from behind. Before she could react, the warrior intervened, knocking the attacker to the ground. Their eyes met, and in that split second, Maggie realized that the man she had admired from afar had become indispensable to her both in battle and in heart. By nightfall, the raiders had retreated once more, leaving Red Rock battered but standing. The townspeople cheered, but Maggie's attention was entirely on him. He was standing at the edge of the square, the flickering torchlight casting shadows across his face, making him seem larger than life. She approached, heart pounding. "You saved us again." "And yet I feel like the one you saved was me." He looked at her steadily, a rare softness in his dark eyes. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "but I think we saved each other." For the first time since his arrival, Maggie let down her guard. She stepped closer, the fire of her pride tempered by the warmth of something deeper. In the midst of chaos and danger, amidst the dust and scars of battle, the greatest victory was beginning to form a bond neither could fight, a love neither expected, but both desperately needed. And in the quiet of that victory, Maggie realized that the fiercest battles weren't fought with swords or bullets. They were fought in hearts willing to trust, to love, and to surrender. Days passed in Red Rock, the town slowly recovering from the relentless raids. Maggie moved through the streets with purpose, but her thoughts kept returning to the Apache warrior. He worked tirelessly alongside her, never asking for praise, never claiming ownership of their victories. Yet she felt an invisible tether between them growing stronger with each passing day. The townspeople, who had once eyed him warily, now nodded in respect whenever he passed. But Maggie noticed that admiration alone did not satisfy her. She wanted to know him, understand the man behind the calm, unwavering exterior. One evening, after the town had settled into an uneasy quiet, she found him standing alone near the edge of the cliffs, staring out at the endless plains. She hesitated, then approached. "You seem far away," she said softly. He turned, and for the first time she saw a shadow of vulnerability in his eyes. "The land carries memories," he said, voice low. "Not all of them easy to bear," Maggie nodded, understanding that pain ran deeper than any battle wound. "We all have ghosts," she admitted. "Some we fight openly, some we hide." He studied her for a long moment, as if weighing whether to trust her with his truths. "I have seen much," he finally said, "and I have learned that courage is not just in fighting others, it is in standing beside someone when they are afraid, and in allowing someone to stand beside you." Her heart tightened. There was no bravado in his words, no games, only honesty. Maggie stepped closer, feeling the heat of his presence and the pull she could no longer deny. "Then perhaps we have both found courage," she whispered. Before she could say more, a commotion erupted at the edge of town. Smoke rose from the western ridge, and the sound of shouting carried across the plains. Another threat, this one closer, more organized, was advancing. Maggie's stomach twisted, but her resolve solidified. "We face them together," she said, her voice firm, and he inclined his head in agreement. This time, the danger was not just raiders, but a band of outlaws who had learned from previous attacks. They came with strategy, intent on destroying Red Rock entirely. Maggie and the warrior moved swiftly, coordinating townsfolk and reinforcing defenses. Every glance they exchanged was a silent conversation of trust, every action a testament to their growing bond. In the heart of battle, Maggie found herself fighting not just for survival, but for the man who had quietly captured her heart. The warrior saved her from a deadly strike, his hand brushing hers in a fleeting, electric moment. She realized then that no victory over enemies could compare to the victory of opening her heart to him. As night fell, the outlaws were driven back, defeated and retreating under the cover of darkness. Red Rock had survived once more, stronger and more united than ever. The townspeople celebrated, but Maggie's attention remained fixed on the warrior. He stood tall, dust and sweat covering him, yet there was a calm in his eyes that made her chest ache. She approached him, heart pounding. I think I understand now," she said. "Some battles are fought with courage, some with hearts willing to trust. And the fiercest of them all." She paused, searching his eyes. "Is the battle to love?" He smiled, the first genuine, unguarded smile she had seen from him. "Then we fight it together," he said. In the quiet after the storm, Maggie felt a sense of peace she had never known. The town was safe, the raiders defeated, and at her side stood a man who had taught her that bravery and love were not opposites, they were intertwined. For Maggie, the fiercest battles were never over, and the greatest victories were not claimed with swords, but with hearts willing to fight for one another. And as she looked into his eyes, she knew that the battle for their love had only just begun, and it was one she was finally ready to fight. The days that followed were quieter, but the tension in Red Rock lingered like a shadow. The Apache warrior had become a fixture in town life, yet Maggie sensed a subtle distance behind his calm demeanor, as if some part of him remained unreachable. She had learned to read his silences and the small gestures that betrayed his thoughts. And with each passing day, the pull between them grew stronger. One morning, as the sun spilled golden light over the town, Maggie found herself walking alongside him. They had been coordinating repairs to the damaged stockade and training townsfolk in defensive drills. But now they moved through the quiet streets, side by side. "You're restless," Maggie observed, her voice teasing but gentle. "Even when the town is safe, your mind never rests." He glanced at her, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at his lips. "A warrior's rest is never complete," he replied softly. "And perhaps a man is never fully at peace until he knows the people he protects are safe." Maggie's heart thumped. The words were simple, yet there was weight to them, a truth she could feel as surely as the wind against her face. She wanted to say more, to tell him that he had already become her safe place, but the words caught in her throat. That evening, as the townspeople gathered for a small celebration of their survival, Maggie found herself drawn to him again. Music and laughter filled the square, but for a moment the noise faded, leaving just the two of them. He extended a hand toward her, a silent invitation she could not refuse. Their dance was hesitant at first, steps unpracticed but guided by an unspoken understanding. Maggie felt the warmth of his body, the strength in his arms, and the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Each step, each turn, erased the walls she had built around her heart, brick by brick. "You fight so many battles," she whispered, resting her head lightly against his shoulder. "But this one feels different. The hardest, and yet the most rewarding," he replied, his voice a soft murmur. "Because it is not fought with weapons, but with trust. And courage." The town's lights twinkled around them, casting shadows that danced with their own. Maggie realized then that the fiercest battles were not against raiders, outlaws, or the dangers of the frontier. They were the battles to open one's heart, to surrender to the unknown, and to embrace the possibility of love. Their connection deepened over the following days, subtle but undeniable. They worked together seamlessly, saving townsfolk, organizing defenses, and even tending to small disputes within Red Rock. Yet in the quiet moments, shared smiles, fleeting touches, and lingering glances, they discovered a comfort and passion neither had. Then came the challenge that would test their bond like never before. A group of traders arrived, bringing word of a larger threat, a band of mercenaries hired to seize control of the surrounding territory. The town would face danger once again, and Maggie realized that survival would require not just courage, but complete trust in each other. Standing atop the cliffs, looking out at the approaching dust clouds on the horizon, Maggie turned to him. "We've come this far together," she said, her voice steady, though her heart raced. "Whatever comes, we face it side by side." He nodded, dark eyes meeting hers with unflinching certainty. "Together," he agreed. In that moment, the battle for Red Rock became more than a fight for survival. It became a testament to their courage, their partnership, and the love quietly growing between them. Maggie felt a surge of determination. No enemy, no fear, and no wall within her heart could withstand the strength they had discovered in each other. As the dust from the approaching threat rose in the distance, Maggie realized that the greatest victories were not won with swords alone, but with hearts brave enough to love, to trust, and to fight for one another. And in that truth, she knew she had finally found her greatest ally, not just in battle, but in life and in love. The morning air carried a tense stillness, broken only by the distant rumble of hooves across the plains. Maggie and the Apache warrior stood atop the cliffs, surveying the horizon where a growing cloud of dust marked the approach of the mercenaries. Red Rock's fate hung in the balance, and for the first time, Maggie felt a deep, sharp pang of fear, not for herself, but for the people she had vowed to protect. "Are we ready?" she asked, her voice steady despite the thrum of adrenaline in her chest. He glanced at her, his expression calm but intense. "We do what we must," he said. "And we do it together." Maggie's heart tightened at his words. Together. They had said it before, in quieter moments, in dances and whispered confessions, but now it meant something far more tangible. It meant fighting side by side, risking everything for the town and for each other. The mercenaries came fast, organized, their shouts carrying across the valley. Maggie turned to the townsfolk who were ready but fearful. "Hold your ground," she shouted. "Trust each other, and trust us." The Apache warrior moved like a shadow through the chaos, intercepting attacks, guiding townsfolk to defend the most vulnerable points. Maggie joined the fray, arrows flying from her bow with unerring accuracy, every movement fueled by determination and an almost desperate need to protect him as much as the town dot at one point. A mercenary broke through the barricade, lunging toward Maggie. She froze for a heartbeat enough for the warrior to appear at her side, weapon in hand, driving the attacker back. Their eyes met, and in that fleeting moment, words became unnecessary. They were a team, perfectly attuned, each instinctively covering the other's weaknesses. Hours stretched into an exhausting battle. The sun climbed higher, sweat and dust coating their bodies, yet neither faltered. Every clash, every maneuver highlighted their bond, not just as allies, but as two hearts learning to trust in a way neither had before. Maggie realized that the battles outside mirrored the battles within: courage, trust, and a willingness to let someone stand beside you, fully and completely. Finally, as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the plains, the mercenaries began to falter. The combined courage of the townsfolk, guided by Maggie and the Apache warrior, pushed the enemy back. The last stragglers fled, leaving Red Rock battered but standing, its people victorious. Breathing heavily, Maggie wiped the sweat and grime from her face. She turned to him, searching for the stoic warrior she had come to admire. He met her gaze, chest rising and falling from exertion, eyes softer now, carrying the unspoken acknowledgment of what they had survived together. "You fought well," she said, voice trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer intensity of the moment. "As did you," he replied, stepping closer. "We fought well, together." Her chest tightened. "It's more than the town," she admitted. I don't know how to say it, but..." He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You don't need to say anything," he murmured. "I understand." Maggie's resolve melted into something tender and vulnerable. She reached up, her fingers brushing against his cheek, feeling the warmth and strength beneath. "Then let me stay here," she whispered. "With you. For all the battles, for all the victories." "For us?" He inclined his head, a rare, genuine smile touching his lips. "Then stay," he said simply, "and fight with me, not just for Red Rock, but for whatever comes next." The sun set behind them, painting the sky in hues of fire and gold. And for the first time in a long while, Maggie felt a profound peace. The town had survived, the threat had passed, and they had discovered something far greater than victory in battle: trust, courage, and the beginnings of a love strong enough to face any challenge. And in that quiet, golden moment, Maggie realized that the fiercest battles had always been worth fighting, because some victories, like the heart, could not be measured by swords alone. The town of Red Rock was quieter now, but peace was always fleeting on the frontier. Maggie and the Apache warrior had grown closer over the weeks since the mercenaries' defeat. Side by side, they had trained the townsfolk, reinforced defenses, and restored Red Rock to a semblance of normalcy. Yet, as the days passed, Maggie began to sense a tension beneath the surface, a tension that had nothing to do with raiders or outlaws. A group of traders and settlers had arrived in town, bringing news, gossip, and a subtle ripple of jealousy. One newcomer, a tall, confident man with a charming smile, seemed particularly taken with Maggie, constantly seeking her attention. The townspeople noticed, whispering among themselves, and Maggie could feel her carefully balanced world beginning to shift. She tried to ignore it, focusing on the town and the Apache warrior who had become her anchor. But one afternoon, she found herself cornered in the general store by the newcomer, who leaned casually against the counter. "Red Rock is lucky to have you," he said, flashing a confident grin. "I can't imagine why someone like you would need anyone else." Maggie's eyes narrowed. "I'm not interested," she said firmly, brushing past him. Yet the seed of doubt had been planted, and her thoughts returned, unbidden, to the warrior. Would he feel threatened by this newcomer? Did he even care if others noticed her strength and beauty? Later, she found him repairing a fence outside the town. His calm presence had always soothed her, and today she needed that steadiness more than ever. "We need to talk," she began, struggling to find the right words. "About everything. About feelings, about trust. About—" He looked up, dark eyes meeting hers, and she saw the subtle tension that mirrored her own. "About us," he finished for her, his voice quiet but firm. "Yes, I feel it too, Maggie. But feelings are not always simple, especially with others stirring trouble." Her heart raced. "I don't want anything or anyone to come between us. But I also don't want doubts to linger. I need to know you trust me. And I need to trust you." He stepped closer, the warm strength of his presence grounding her. "I trust you. And I know you trust me. That is enough, the rest." We faced together. Their conversation was interrupted by a shout from the edge of town. A small group of raiders, emboldened and reckless, had returned. Red Rock's defenses were solid, but Maggie and the warrior moved instantly, side by side, issuing commands and positioning townsfolk. Their movements were seamless, a testament to weeks of training, mutual respect, and growing intimacy. During the battle, the newcomer who had tried to ingratiate himself with Maggie attempted to take charge. But the Apache warrior intercepted him, holding him back with firm authority. Maggie realized then that their bond had grown beyond words. It was a trust proven in fire, in danger, and in the quiet moments between. After the raiders were driven off, Maggie and the warrior stood atop the cliffs, the town safe once more. She turned to him, voice soft. "We faced doubt, temptation, and danger. And we survived all of it. Together." He took her hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. "Yes, and no outside force, fear, jealousy, or threat can break what we have if we remain honest and steadfast." Maggie smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Then let's remain steadfast, always, for the town. And for us." He pressed a gentle kiss to her temple, a silent promise of loyalty, protection, and love. In that quiet moment, Maggie understood that the fiercest battles were no longer only fought on the plains. They were fought in hearts willing to trust, to forgive, and to remain steadfast even when the world sought to interfere. The frontier could be harsh, and threats would always rise, but together, Maggie and the Apache warrior had discovered a strength that transcended swords, a love as unyielding and enduring as the land itself. A week after the skirmish with the raiders, Red Rock seemed calm. The townspeople moved about their daily routines, children laughed, and the sun cast a warm glow over the plains. But Maggie sensed unease in the air, subtle but persistent, a warning that peace in the frontier was always fragile. Apache warrior had grown closer to her with each passing day. They shared quiet moments repairing fences, training townsfolk, and discussing strategies. Yet, beneath the calm exterior, Maggie knew that both of them carried fears. The fear of losing the town, the fear of failing their people, and most of all, the fear of opening their hearts fully to one another. One afternoon, news arrived that shook Red Rock to its core. A rival town, jealous of Red Rock's survival and prosperity, had hired mercenaries to attack. The traders who had recently arrived brought warnings of a force far larger and more organized than any they had faced. Maggie's chest tightened. She had thought the previous battles were the worst, but now a greater threat loomed, one that could destroy everything they had built. The Apache warrior stood beside her, surveying the horizon with eyes that missed nothing. "We must prepare," he said quietly. "This will be the most dangerous battle yet," Maggie nodded, fighting the flutter of fear in her stomach. "We'll face it together," she replied, echoing the words they had spoken so many times before. But deep down, she knew this battle would not only test their courage, It would test their trust, their bond, and their ability to fight not just for survival, but for the love growing between them. They worked tirelessly to reinforce defenses, train townsfolk, and devise strategies. Yet as the day wore on, tensions began to rise. Some townspeople questioned the Apache warrior's loyalty, whispering doubts about his heritage and allegiance. Maggie found herself caught between defending the man she loved and maintaining authority in her town. "You cannot let their doubts sway you," he said later, as they stood together watching the sun dip below the cliffs. "I am here. I have always been here." Trust is stronger than suspicion. Maggie's heart ached with both pride and longing. "I trust you," she whispered. "But it's hard when others cannot see what I see." He reached for her hand, holding it with quiet reassurance. "Then let us show them together." The next morning, the rival mercenaries arrived, a dark wave of horsemen and armed men sweeping across the plains. The battle erupted with a ferocity neither Red Rock nor its defenders had experienced before. Maggie moved with precision, directing townsfolk and shooting arrows, while the warrior struck with lethal skill, intercepting attacks and keeping their people safe. Midway through the battle, a fire broke out near the town's granary. Maggie ran toward it, determined to save both supplies and townsfolk, but was caught in the chaos of falling debris. The warrior appeared instantly, pulling her to safety, their bodies pressed close for a heartbeat. In that moment, the roar of battle faded, and Maggie realized that her fear was not of the mercenaries, but of losing him. As the sun set and the last of the mercenaries fled, Red Rock stood battered but victorious. The townsfolk cheered, their faith restored, and Maggie finally allowed herself a breath of relief. She turned to him, their hands still entwined, and whispered, "We survived. Together." He pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "And we will survive whatever comes next," he said softly. "Because this town, and this heart," he added, cupping hers, "are worth every battle." For Maggie, it was clear. The fiercest struggles were never just against enemies on the horizon. They were the trials of trust, love, and courage that shaped not only the town but the hearts that defended it. And in the quiet after the storm, she understood that the greatest victories were always shared. Red Rock awoke to a fragile calm. The battle had left scars on the town, on its people, and on Maggie herself. Yet, as she walked through the streets, she felt a renewed determination. The Apache warrior had proven himself in every way, not just as a fighter, but as a partner, a protector, and in ways she had only recently begun to admit, as the keeper of her heart. But peace rarely lasts long on the frontier. A messenger arrived with urgent news. One of Red Rock's own, a trusted townsman, had betrayed them, revealing critical defenses to a hidden faction of outlaws. Maggie's stomach twisted. The town's survival and the safety of everyone she cared for hung by a thread. She turned to the Apache warrior, whose dark eyes were steady and unwavering, even as the weight of this betrayal settled over them both. "We cannot fight alone," he said softly, taking her hand. "But we will face this together, as we have always done." Maggie nodded, her fingers tightening around his. She could feel the same determination in him that had drawn her from the beginning, the quiet strength that made him impossible to fear and impossible to ignore. "Then we face it," she said, "and we do not falter." The betrayal hit like a thunderclap. Outlaws, guided by their inside information, struck suddenly, targeting the town's outer perimeter. Maggie and the Apache warrior were immediately at the forefront, coordinating townsfolk and rallying defenses. The air was thick with smoke, dust, and the roar of battle cries. At one point, Maggie was separated from the warrior by a collapsing barricade. She fought fiercely, but the enemy's numbers overwhelmed her for a moment. Then, as if drawn by instinct, he appeared at her side, felling attackers with precision and guiding her back to safety. Their eyes met in that heartbeat, and the unspoken words between them, trust, courage, love, were stronger than any battle cry. The town rallied, fueled by the strength of their leaders. Together, Maggie and the warrior led a counterattack using strategy, skill, and the unbreakable bond they had forged. The outlaws, confident in their inside information, were caught off guard by the unity and tenacity of the defenders. As the final outlaws fled into the plains, the town stood, battered but unbroken. Maggie found herself leaning against the warrior, her chest heaving, sweat and soot marking their faces. "We survived," she whispered, not just to the town but to him. He pressed his forehead gently to hers. "We survive because we fight together. And because we trust each other, even when the world seems to turn against us." A hush fell over the town square as the townspeople looked on, witnessing the bond that had carried Red Rock through fire and betrayal. Maggie realized finally that the fiercest battles were not against enemies or outlaws, they were against fear, doubt, and the vulnerability of opening one's heart. She looked up at him, the setting sun casting golden light across his face, and smiled. "I don't need to fight alone anymore," she admitted. "I've found my strongest ally." "And I," he replied, "have found mine." The town would face threats again, as the frontier was never truly safe. But Maggie knew that, together, they could face anything: raiders, betrayal, even the uncertainties of life. Love, trust, and courage had become their greatest weapons, and with those, Red Rock would endure. In the quiet that followed the storm, Maggie finally allowed herself to believe that the greatest battles, those of the heart, could indeed be won. And in winning, she had discovered a victory more profound than any fought with sword or shield, a love that was steadfast, fierce, and enduring. The first light of dawn spilled over Red Rock, painting the town in soft gold. After weeks of relentless battles, betrayals, and close calls, a fragile peace had settled. Maggie stood atop the cliffs, overlooking the town she had fought so hard to protect. Beside her, the Apache warrior, the man who had saved the town, and her heart stood silently, watching the horizon with calm vigilance. "This moment feels surreal," Maggie admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "After everything, it's finally quiet." He turned to her, his dark eyes warm, steady, and full of an intensity that never failed to make her pulse quicken. "Quiet is temporary," he said softly, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "But this," he gestured to the town below, to the people who were rebuilding, laughing, and living again. "This is worth every battle," Maggie nodded, feeling a sense of pride swell in her chest. The town was safe. The townspeople were alive and thriving. And she had learned a truth more profound than any victory in battle: love, courage, and trust were victories that no enemy could ever take from her. The Apache warrior reached for her hand, entwining his fingers with hers. She felt the familiar warmth, the quiet reassurance that no matter what came next, they faced it together. "We fought for this town, for our people." "And for each other," he said. "Now it's time to fight for something else." Maggie tilted her head, curious. "And what is that?" "A life together," he replied simply, his voice steady. "One where we protect, love, and stand side by side, not just in battle, but in every quiet moment that follows." Her heart tightened, emotion spilling over. I want that," she admitted, letting herself be vulnerable for the first time fully. "More than I ever thought possible." He drew her close, pressing his forehead to hers. "Then we begin," he murmured, and in that moment the world seemed to shrink to just the two of them. Dust, sweat, and scars from the battles melted into insignificance beside the quiet certainty of their bond. As the townspeople emerged from their homes, some still wary, some jubilant, they witnessed a different kind of victory, a love forged in fire, tested by fear, and tempered with courage. Maggie and the warrior, hand in hand, represented a union of strength and heart, a living testament to the fact that even the fiercest hearts could learn to trust, to yield, and to embrace love. Days passed, and Red Rock flourished. Fields were replanted, fences repaired, and children played safely under the watchful eyes of their protectors. Maggie and the Apache warrior became the town's guiding force, a partnership built on respect, trust, and a bond that had grown through shared danger and shared triumphs. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant hues of crimson and gold, Maggie and the warrior stood at the edge of the cliffs once more. The wind carried the scent of the plains, of new beginnings, and of hope. She rested her head against his shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "Whatever comes next," she whispered, "we face it together." "Together," he echoed, pressing a gentle kiss to her temple. Always, in that quiet golden twilight, Maggie realized that the fiercest battles were not only those fought with swords or shields, they were the battles of the heart. And in winning them, she had discovered a love stronger than fear, fiercer than pride, and enduring beyond any danger the frontier could bring. Red Rock stood resilient, its people safe, and two hearts, once wary, stubborn, and guarded, had finally found what they had been fighting for all along, each other. And as night fell, the stars above bore witness to a love forged in battle, sealed with trust, and destined to endure every challenge that lay ahead. The frontier could be harsh, unpredictable, and dangerous, but together, Maggie and the Apache warrior were unstoppable. Their story had reached a close, not with the sound of swords, but with the quiet, enduring victory of love.